pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes.
My husband.
King that shall be.
If we should fail.
We fail. Didst thou not hear noise?
Methought I heard a voice cry, sleep no more.
Are you a man?
Aye, and a bold one, that dare look upon that which might appall the devil.
I have no words. My voice is in my sword.
Hi, yes, Michael Major, BroadwayWorld.com. You have so much experience on stage, whether it be Shakespeare or beyond. So what was it like bringing this piece that so many people may be familiar with in a theatrical setting to the big screen?
It was just an absolute joy from start to finish, to be honest. I knew the play very, very well. I just directed it. But luckily, the way that my theatre company works is that we don't really make any decisions. So it wasn't like we had all landed on the quote unquote right or best way to do anything. But therefore it meant that I could be very open to the processes and other people's performances and their way of interpreting the roles. But I brought a really deep understanding of what was happening in the play and the use of the language and stuff that I found really, really helpful and useful. And Joel's version, his screenplay, as a film in general, but as a version of Macbeth is so exquisitely put together and really just sort of folds back in on Macbeth all the time, rather than in any way showing off as a director, I think, or it seems to just be constantly refocusing you on the story and the characters and the predicaments, which I think is kind of really classy of him. And for me to play a part that obviously exists in the play, but that he has refashioned in a very different way for the purposes of the film and created this different narrative, to get to collaborate with him on the level necessary for us to work out what this character should be together was just an utter and profound artistic joy, I must say.
Thank you.
Ashley.
Yes. Hi, Alex. Ashley Dunn, Where's the Buzz TV?
Hi.
Yes. Hi, Alex again. So you directed, as you said, a version of Macbeth for your theater company, The Factory. But how did you approach taking the play that you were so familiar with and translating it on screen?
Well, the real gift I have, as I said before, was the fresh way and the very unique way that Joel was choosing to present and interpret the character of Ross. In the play, he's a fairly expositional character in that it's mainly about his function for other characters. Whereas, so meaning that he doesn't really have much subtext necessarily. He's fairly kind of what he's saying and what he's doing is importing information for the plot and stuff. Whereas what Joel did, by adding him into different scenes and by giving him some other people's lines and putting him in scenes that he wouldn't usually be in and giving him actions to do that he wouldn't usually do, is to create this massive layer of subtext in the character that isn't usually there. So the great pleasure, therefore, being that as a character, he wants to be perceived in each scene in a certain way, so that he can move through the world successfully and fulfill his own ends, but can't be caught, but has a completely different agenda. So has to very convincingly present as one thing whilst kind of moving people around and manipulating people and puppet mastering stuff in the background. So that was just it meant that I had to think of the character in the play in a completely new and different way, which was extremely exciting, but also a bit, before I got there anyway, quite nerve-wracking, because I read the script and was like, why is he doing all of those things? I saw it was very difficult to perceive what his intentions were, what his allegiances were, and what his kind of end game was. And while between Joe and I, we made some decisions about that, or I privately made some decisions about it, we really felt it was important that the audience, that should be the audience's feeling. They shouldn't know why he's doing those things. They shouldn't be able to get a grasp on the kind of person he is, or what his intentions are. Just that he's obviously up to something, and that should be potentially unsettling and tense.
Thank you, Alex.
All right,
Nikki.
thank you.
Nikki Fowler, Glitter Magazine. Hi, Alex. How are you?
Hi, good. Thank you.
Thank you. This film just breathes, and that's the best way for me to say how I received the film, with this perfect mesh of language and the visuals. What were your thoughts on seeing the final film come together? Just your personal take on it.
Yeah, I was pretty knocked out. I mean, it's very, very close to the screenplay that Joel wrote. So he tends, I believe, to use almost everything that he shoots. He's not the kind of director that then, reshuffles everything around afterwards. So it's pretty faithful to what I knew we'd shot and what the screenplay was. And in fact, unlike some other directors, you're welcome to get the storyboards each day when you're shooting with Joel, which is really interesting and really helpful. I've got a big wodge of storyboards at home now that I'll keep as a memento. So it was kind of close to what I'd imagined, but what you don't obviously get is the culminative effect of the film, the kind of ominous ball rolling towards some terrible climax. Obviously, knowing the play, you know what that is, but the way that the characters feel about it, the way that the story is being told is new. And I was just incredibly proud to be part of what I think is really kind of an art house film, and caring a great deal about Shakespeare and cinema, as I do, to be sort of in the middle of both of those things with these incredible actors and creative people was a great honor. And I think it's a really good film of Macbeth. I think it's really a brilliant telling of Macbeth that I hope will stand the test of time.
Thank you.
Dana. Crombie from the Coalition, kind of to piggyback off of the visuals. It is one of the most standout movies that I've seen for this year. By it simply being in black and white, there's so many different layers that it adds to the film. I was wondering, during either the rehearsal or the filming process, by knowing it was going to be in black and white, did that change your interpretation of the script and how you wanted to bring your performance on screen?
No, I don't think it did, other than the black and white being part of a whole stylistic world that was being created that was not realistic or naturalistic, I guess. So to take away the color, obviously, you're taking away one of the main faculties that most people perceive the world in. So you're immediately seeing it as being something other that is not real. And the aspect ratio is the same, the Academy aspect ratio. When we see in our own vision, obviously it's pretty widescreen. So the fact that it was sort of focused in that way, but also the sets, we filmed everything apart from the last shot on sound stages. Everything that had been made as sets, and they are very good sets, but they don't exactly look real. They're sort of dreamy in some way. And the lighting, the very, very hard lines, the chiaroscuro lighting, and even the costumes, which are beautifully rendered, but are also not aiming to be historically accurate to any particular time. This isn't seemingly set in Scotland. There are people with American accents and English accents, Irish accents, Welsh accents. So I guess the fact that it wasn't set in some idea of a real world did, I guess, make was, I don't know if I considered it, but it sort of seeps in to what you're doing. The character, I mean, there are witches in it. There are witches in it, and it's there's a supernatural element to it. So it's got this whole other part of it. And I think Ross, one of the questions that I think is interesting about Ross is how much is he connected to that other realm or not? What does he know? What doesn't he know? So there was a certain heightened nature of performing. I don't know about performing, but I could make choices that if it were a naturalistic version of this, I might not make. And that was really exciting. And Joel, I think, was excited to sort of push the edges of those things. It was just incredible every day seeing the monitor and being like, wow, this is so beautiful. And then, on top of that, amazingly well acted by the company.
Thank you.
Adonis.
Hi, Adonis for Nerds of Color.
Hi.
So I wanted to ask, in terms of Ross, you mentioned earlier that the audience doesn't really know what it is or which side he's truly on or what it is that he truly wants. In your mind, when performing the role, did you see him more as like a hero or a villain type, or what was Ross to you in your head while you were getting ready for
That's a really, really good question. I think it's useful not to think in terms of hero or villain or good or bad when approaching a part, because you want to get behind their decisions. But I definitely saw him as being someone that was very, very shrewd, or thought of himself as being very, very shrewd, very intelligent, very manipulative, and I guess he comes off as fairly Machiavellian. So I think definitely he has a very loose moral compass, I think. I think there are some fairly shining examples of loose moral compasses throughout the story, but Ross definitely is willing to throw people under the bus or take advantage of people's misfortune for his own ends. I think maybe he feels in the long run he's doing something for some kind of, well, I don't know, what I thought about at times, whilst exploring it, was that Ross maybe there was a bigger picture in his mind, a much, much bigger picture that involved different realms of existence and stuff like that, on the supernatural and things. So even if he was making what was perceived in this worldly realm as being a bad or violent or villainous choice, he was potentially being led to that by some higher idea or ideal. But I think I was in every scene trying to see where the cracks in the characters were that he could exploit, which I guess is not a wholly heroic way of approaching relationships.
Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Alex, you mentioned it being a kind of an art house film and loving that as both a theater person and a cinephile, and that really resonated with me because at the time that I was really falling in love with Shakespeare as a teenager, one of my great mentors that introduced me to that also introduced me to Ingmar Bergman, and specifically The Seventh Seal. And both visually and tonally, there are things about this film that really brought that movie to mind. And I was curious, as a cinephile, as you said, if there was anything that you felt, if there were any clear influences you felt for this film, or that Joel said that he was influenced by, or whether it was just something wholly new.
Yes, I mean, what I think is really fascinating about the film is that it is sort of set in the history of cinema. It's like, it's not set in a version of Scotland. It's kind of set in the history of cinema and in the history of Shakespeare on film. they would, yes. I mean, they do talk about, and I say they, meaning Bruno Debanel, also, who's the DP, and Joel would talk about Seventh Seal, talk about Bergman, talk about German Expressionism, about Kurosawa, Polanski. I think they're wearing those homages. Wouldn't even say that they're homages. It is intentionally set in that kind of world, I think. And which I find so fascinating, because the film to me is incredibly unique, but part of the way in which it's unique is the fact that it is referencing theatre and the history of theatre and the history of film somehow. And it is very theatrical and very cinematic. It sort of straddles those, and for me, pleases both of those kind of aspects of myself as an audience.
Thank you.
Thanks. No worries.
Alex?
Hi,
Yeah.
Alex.
Other Alex. Hi, Alex. Sorry, I was confused there.
Congrats on the film. And also, this seems to be a bumper 6 months from Macbeth, having seen the Almeida production. We're being spoiled right here. And what do you think it is about the way in which Shakespeare's language in particular is used on screen that differs from the way in which it's used on stage? And did you approach it differently in the way that you went about preparing and sort of delivering your lines?
What a great question. I have a strong background in really trying to utilize and sort of obey the clues and, if I were going to really go for it, rules within iambic pentameter and Shakespeare's verse pattern. I'm a real kind of geek about it, to be honest. I find it immensely. For me, it is almost the entirety of my work on a Shakespearean role, and then psychological thinking. But that all really comes from the verse for me, and what Shakespeare is essentially directing the actor through his use of verse, which I think is part of his immense genius. So my approach in that respect was the same. Then, I mean, this is always the aim, is to not be caught doing that work at the same time, but it is even more important when you're in a very tight close-up. You don't want to be seen to be lying or to be being technical. So there was a slight looseness about it that I just gave myself a bit more space with it, I guess. But it was fascinating. There was no sort of prescribed way that we should be approaching the language in the production. We had a great wealth of experience with Shakespeare, and on both on film and on stage within the company. And we rehearsed for 3 weeks, which was amazing. And we had kind of Shakespeare specialists and text specialists in the room and stuff. So we would really share those thoughts, but everyone was really, Joel wanted everyone to bring their own sort of way of approaching it. So that was just absolutely amazing to see. And I feel that the film, and Joel, I think, is particularly, so we shut down because of COVID with 2 weeks left to go, or it ended up being 2 weeks, whether it was or not. And in that time, Bruno, Fran and Joel all lived together and cut everything that we had shot together. And so Joel had the great benefit of seeing what he'd shot so far. And he came back with a renewed confidence and pleasure in the great differences in the ways that everyone was approaching. There's like a real mix of styles, and, Denzel's work in this is incredibly relaxed and subtle and interior. And he really traces the long arches of the thought and stuff. So yeah, I think it was super exciting. I don't know if that really answers your question, but it was wonderful to see everyone's different approaches, and now to see the combined effect of those.
Thank you,
Andrew.
Hi, Alex. Andrew Marsall here from AFP. Many congratulations.
Thank you.
Obviously, you, as has been discussed, you've worked on a lot of Shakespeare with a lot of incredible actors on the stage. I'm curious to know how these top level Hollywood stars, Denzel and Francis in particular, did you see anything different about how they approached the role or delivered their performances that felt distinctive to their background as these Oscar-winning.
That's really, really interesting. I mean, they both have done a great deal of work on stage and Shakespeare on stage. So they, well, I think actually that was part of the surprise was the fact that we got to rehearse, and when we rehearsed, it felt like like we were doing theatre. In that we taped out on the floor, the sets and stuff, and there was a real sense of company and community in a way that often there isn't when you shoot. If you don't rehearse, and you might just be in your trailers and never sort of pass with someone. So it really felt that we were all in it together and really trying to do something together. And they're kind of, as much as they are cinema beasts, they felt like, and they are, I think, theatre beasts too. So there was that kind of muscularity that can come from the reserves needed to do something over and over and over and over and over in front of a big audience, I suppose. Yeah, fascinating. I guess again they had different approaches, as we all did. So I suppose an interesting line is which comes first, the technicality of the verse or the sort of psychology of your interpretation. And it was really fascinating to see the blends of those kind of scales for people. But what's wonderful about this kind of work, these parts are incredibly difficult, and it requires a massive amount of any actor, however experienced or inexperienced, to be able to sort of fully conceive of an interpretation, I suppose. So in that respect, they're the same as everyone I've ever worked with. You have to put the time in and work really, really hard and really try and be very, very specific about what you're saying. And that's what they were doing.
And our final question will be Kuya's.
Kuya P Nerds Rule the World. Alex, thank you for your time. Once you received Joel's script, was there a particular scene you were looking forward to performing?
Wow, what a great question. I mean, I was just looking forward in general to all of it, I have to say. I guess from a sort of, holy shit, what's this going to be like? Any scene with Denzel and Fran was like, okay, this is going to be really interesting, isn't it? And it was, and they're amazing. In terms of Ross, I guess, in terms of the playing of the character instead of the experience of shooting it, I guess, one of the really tough scenes is when he tells Macduff about the death of his family, the slaughter of his family, and particularly with this version of Ross, when you really get a sense that he's been involved in that sort of dark, those decisions and sort of fixing those actions to happen. What exactly he was doing and meaning by the way that he approaches that scene, in that he starts by saying, which is just in the text. I mean, that's not my version of it. In the text, he says, no, they're fine. They're all totally fine. And then, obviously later gives the news. So sort of solving that and what that was about and why it became a sort of key to my understanding of other parts of the character. So I was looking forward to that. Yeah. And it's a high pressured scene. It's like, that's a really difficult scene for Corey, for any person playing Macduff. It's, you know that you've got to be good in that scene. So I was looking forward to seeing what would happen. And Corey is absolutely amazing.
Thanks so much, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for a great conversation. That's our time. And
hi, Michael Major from BroadwayWorld.com. You have so much experience on stage. You performed on Broadway and beyond. So what was it like getting to bring this piece that so many people may be familiar with in a theatrical setting to the big screen?
Hey, Michael. It was thrilling, man. I to be honest, I just sort of, I'm kind of still pinching myself that I got the opportunity to be a part of something that I think is a cinematic masterpiece, and not only to do that, but to be doing Shakespeare, which I remember a teacher of ours, Michael Kahn, always called it sort of the Olympics of acting. So having been able to do it on both stage and now, the silver screen, so to speak, it's a joy and it's a pleasure. And I love that there is a sort of theatricality and to the way that Joel envisions this version of Macbeth, and so it sort of lends itself to that theatricality in a really beautiful way. And yeah, I mean, I love Shakespeare. I love the theater, and so it felt like theater. It felt like the rehearsal process and those over 3 weeks. It felt like which was a luxury that you don't normally get on a film. So there were all these we became this like company almost. So it was thrilling in that way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley, where's the buzz?
Hi, Corey.
Hi, Ashley.
Hello. So you're no stranger to Macbeth. Like you said, you familiar with this play. You played Macbeth actually while attending Juilliard. So when you got cast for this film, did this feel like a full circle moment for you?
It did. I remember it's crazy because I remember having a deja vu moment when I got the call, and I say it all the time, but deja vu for me is God reminding you that you're on the right path, and and it sort of all did come a bit full circle for me. I felt like prior to that production that you're talking about, I was in a really bad place at school. I was like, not, I was thinking, I was like, am I going to make it through Juilliard? I was on probation. I just wasn't getting it. I just didn't understand. And Shakespeare, I remember doing actually the dagger speech for that teacher who I was just talking about, Michael Kahn, who used to run the division. He doesn't anymore, but he tore it apart. He was like, it was just the worst thing I'd ever done. And because I wasn't focusing on the work, on the words, on the, it was everything else but that. And I remember after that pouring myself into, I was like, third year, I'm not going to give them or anybody any excuse not to allow me to be my best self and not to take myself out of something. So anyways, I'm just fortunate enough to have had that experience, because now coming back to this, it also allowed me a new sort of appreciation and understanding from Macduff's point of view of Macbeth. Yeah.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Nikki, Glitter Magazine.
Nikki Fowler, Glitter Magazine. Hi, Corey. How are you?
I'm good, Nikki. How you doing?
Great. Thank you. Can you share, I'm sure you have many, but can you share one moment in the film that really stood out as an incredible creative experience for you?
Oh, man. Okay. Because every moment felt like that for me. I don't know if I was, well, there was a few. First of all, I'll just say it wasn't in the film. It was mostly the rehearsal process. It was everything sort of leading up, watching Denzel and Francis and all the other great actors in this sort of watching the sauce get made. That for me was, it gave me permission to be my best self, to stretch and to play and to fall flat on my face in front of these greats. It gave me permission to that Shakespeare can hold more than just what we say it can hold. And so it was just really thrilling to kind of like watch and be a fly on the wall and then be able to participate in that. Also, I think creatively, like me and Moses Ingram, we were like on set every day. Like they couldn't pull us away from set. So I remember the leaves, all of the leaves, because everything was inside. And the fact that was even possible was mind blowing. But I remember the leaves, when the wood comes to Duntonay, it just it was I remember the conversations that they were having just about the texture of the leaves and how it would read on black and white. And there were so many different conversations about leaves. And I'm like, like just the specificity of it all was just incredible. What he was able to do in that scene with me and Malcolm, Harry Melling, walking down before I found out about my family, the leaves sort of falling, all of that was inside on a soundstage. And I was like, man, I don't know how they're going to pull this off. Of course they're going to pull it off, but it was just it was like moments like that. Every moment I was learning something new, and surrounded by greats. So it was good.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dana, the Coalition.
Hello, Dana Abercrombie, the Coalition. I was wondering, Macbeth and Macduff are basically the yin and yang of each other. And I feel that, you both are very different, but also very similar. Either during the rehearsal process or during the filming, was there a lot of talk on how you both interpreted the script and how those characters would behave slightly different, but would have similarities within each other?
Well, first, I think you're absolutely right. They are the yin, it's yin and yang. It's good versus evil or perceived evil. He represents the morality of this world. He represents all that is good, all that is virtuous and pious. And I just sometimes it's fun to play the villain, but sometimes it's just great to play, a good guy and to watch that fall, and sort of, because he could easily become what Macbeth is. And he makes a choice not to do that. He makes a choice to choose his to blame himself. The fact that he wasn't there is the reason that they're dead. It's not Macbeth's fault. So I thought that was fascinating and something I wanted to explore, sort of the levels of and the nuance of that. It isn't all fire and bluster. These are warriors, but they're also men, and they also feel things. And so I wanted to, but in talking to Denzel about it, I remember we were talking about we had conversations about, me looking up to him and, what if, I found out that he, that Denzel did something, you know what I mean? That was, or got to where he is, by doing something wrong, and how would that change my opinion of him? And, it was just fun to be able to just casually chat about those things. But at the end of the day, it's all on the page, so we just had to follow the roadmap and sort of, he made it easy because he played the heck out of it. He just sort of, he went there with it. And so all I had to do was sort of just be the antithesis and allow it to be where it was.
Thank you.
Adonis, Nerds of Color.
Hey, Corey, how's it going?
Good, Adonis. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. So I wanted to ask, you mentioned earlier your experience with Shakespeare and with Broadway and your love for it, your history with it. And I wanted to ask, with you and Denzel Washington playing Black versions of Macbeth and Macduff, it's something we don't really see a lot. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that Black kids and Black people in general truly do love Shakespeare. So did that cultural impact ever come did you guys ever talk about that on set, or did that ever come across, did that ever cross your mind when you guys were filming it?
Strangely, it doesn't really cross your mind until after it's done. Because at the end of the day, we're doing the work, and I think that's the best form of representation is when somebody steps into a role and just, they are who they are. I can't change this skin. I can't change this hair. I can't change this. I can't change that. But what I can do is be excellent at the thing that, people may not expect. And so I think that's where Denzel sort of comes from. I can't speak for him, but I know that he sort of embraces that as well. We weren't sort of, thinking about the black and the white. The only black and the white was what's on screen, black and white. You know what I mean? It's like, for us, it was just about, and it is important. It is representation. I always say this, like, if there's some little boy or some little girl who's going to watch this film and might be able to watch it, and they have access to it and see themselves. They'll see Moses Ingram up there with this little Black kid. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. This young kid is speaking Shakespeare, and he's probably their age, and they could get curious about it. And what did Nina Simone say? More curious about who they are and where they come from and where. And so I just love that we have the capacity for it. Yes, Black folks do love Shakespeare. We probably love Shakespeare without even knowing that we love Shakespeare, because there's so many references in songs and the things that in the culture that we love. And so it is it's an honor to like be able to do this and to be side by side with, you know, with these actors, these Black actors up here doing this, because we have just as much ownership of it as anyone else.
Wholeheartedly agree, and thank you, man.
Thanks.
Patrick, Slug Magazine.
Thank you very much. Patrick Gibbs, Slug Magazine. Corey, congratulations on an amazing year between this and In the Heights. Two great films. You know, I've actually played Ross, excuse me, not Ross, Macduff myself, and I was really wanting to jump in and ask you some questions about that scene where you found out, where he finds out about his family. But you talked about working with Denzel, and I'm having to jump to that. Such an icon. One of my heroes. And it occurs to me, one of his most iconic lines that most often quoted in movie history is, "King Kong ain't got nothing on me."
Okay.
Having been in Kong Skull Island and then facing off against Denzel Washington as Macbeth in this, you may be the only person in the world who can answer, who is the bigger badass, King Kong or Denzel Washington?
Well, that's an easy one, and it's Denzel Washington for sure. Because I watched, man. I mean, I you know, King Kong ain't got nothing on him, man. It's thrilling to it's so funny you put it that way. It's thrilling to watch somebody at this point in his career continue to raise the bar. And he doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to, you know, he just simply doesn't have to take this risk. He really doesn't. But that's a sign of a great artist. It's a sign of a great man. I mean, he really is all about sort of pushing it forward. And I just I respect that, man. I think it's to be the sort of, to be able to play the foil to Macbeth. You know, King Kong may not have nothing on him, but Macduff sure does, I guess.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alex, Theater Mania.
Hi, Corey. You were talking about, you know, this all being shot on a soundstage, and also there's just a rich filmic history that's clearly sort of imbued into every shot, from the lighting to the shot setup and the aspect ratio. But so that must be for you quite, almost in a way, normally when you get to do film or theatre, you're flexing one set of muscles, but here, you know, you're basically doing a full workout, like all body. Yeah. And how is that really, just to be able to, that must be a gift of an opportunity.
Yeah, it's scary because, you know, you got to do it all. You technically have to be able to, well, first you technically have to be able to do it, you know, and then you have to be free enough to know that there's no right way to do it. That you know, Shakespeare has now become this sort of, you know, it used to be even, you know, 20, 30 years ago, you know, that there's a right way to sort of do Shakespeare. And so to watch Joel re-envision this classic, right, and take it in and put it on its head, and he's pulling from so many different references in terms of cinematic history, in terms of like what, you know, he's doing with this, but he's also allowing these, because we're all of us in this company are theater actors, and so you know, so putting it's a bit of an experiment almost. It's like putting us in this context and letting us sort of run free. Sorry, excuse me. But yeah, it's just thrilling, man. Like, I feel like the theatricality of it it just sort of lends itself beautifully to Joel's to his aesthetic, you know. And there's certain muscles that you do have to flex. There's certain, you know, there's a certain you have to, again, like I said, be able to do it. But Denzel's version of Shakespeare is different from Fran's, it's different from mine, it's different from Catherine's, Moses, and go on and on. But it holds it all. And again, he's able to, you know, come right in and to an extreme close up, like extreme close up, and tell a story with just, you know, the way someone's eye flickers, you know, and then back out to the sort of macro. So I'm just lucky that I got to be a part of this like mind-bending dreamscape and painting that that Joel put together.
Andrew, AFP.
Hi, Corey. Many congratulations.
Thank you.
Obviously, the scene where Macduff finds out about his family being slaughtered is one of the most difficult scenes in the play, possibly in Shakespeare. And this film version is obviously, I mean, you're going through so many emotions so quickly of shock and grieving and anger. And this play, this film even kind of condenses the play and speeds it up in many ways even further. I was wondering how you approached that scene and what conversations you had with the director about how to convey all of that so quickly in that incredible scene.
Well, I thought it was interesting. I mean, Macduff just sort of gets tossed around a little bit, and he's first of all, Ross comes to him, and Macduff asks Ross if his family is good, and Ross is like, yeah, they were good when I left. I mean, he lies to him. He literally lies to his face. And Macduff is sitting there like, okay, so, okay, that's all good. Tell me about Scotland. And so that's the first thing. He sort of does that. And then he pulls the rug out from under him. So there's like this sort of weird, it's like, why would someone do that to someone else? Ross got some issues, man. But I think, I'm just like, why would somebody do that to someone? But anyways, the realization that his family has been slaughtered, savagely slaughtered by someone who he loves, he respects, he looks up to, and I talked to Denzel about that as well. Is that there is a kinship there, you know, and you know, maybe it's because he looks like him. It's because, you know, whatever that is. But whatever that is, there is a respect there. There's a hope that one day Macduff will walk in the footsteps that that Macbeth is trotting. And so when this happens, it feels like the deepest level of betrayal. And my job was, again, to follow the roadmap, what's on the page. And it goes like this. But, you know, and I've seen productions where it just, you know, Macduff is all, you know, fire and bluster, but I think he's not ready to process it yet. And so he's trying to figure that out. And talking to Joel, I remember on the day, I remember turning away from the camera, and Joel was like, what is he doing? Wait, what's going on? And so we had a conversation, and Joel was like, actually, I love that idea. Let's stay on his back. And then when we have the opportunity to come, because this man cannot bring himself to let this out, but he has to let this out. So then he was like, well, let's figure out a way, because it wasn't on a storyboard. It was just where we were that day. And remember, Denzel was there, and we were all just like, you know, just sort of trying to plot through it without pushing, you know, and we brought the camera around, and then you could, you know, sort of see the other side. And so it was just awesome because he allowed Macduff to be where he is. It is heartbreaking, but Macduff blames himself. He says, sinful Macduff. He doesn't blame Macbeth. He doesn't. He wants his revenge, of course, but he blames himself. And I think that's telling about who he is and the kind of man he is. So yeah, that's all I said about that.
Hi, Mr. Washington. Michael Major from BroadwayWorld.com. You have a lot of experience on stage. You performed Shakespeare on Broadway. So, what was it like bringing this piece that so many people may be familiar with in a theatrical setting to the big screen?
It was fun. It was fun because it so much was left to our imagination. The way that Joel designed the sets and the lighting, and there wasn't a lot of stuff that, actors stuff to lean on, props and things like that. It was just sort of bare spaces. So it was like raw with the language and the other actors. So that made it a little more frightening, but more fun as well.
Thank you.
All right, our next question goes to Kuya P with Nerds Rule the World.
Kuya P, Nerds Rule the World. Thank you, Denzel. This is truly a pleasure.
I like that hat.
Oh, thanks so much. Once you got Joel's script to prepare for this, was there a particular scene that you were ready to chomp your teeth into when you got on set?
No, I didn't look at it that way. I mean, every line, every scene is a challenge, because the language is so foreign. But I didn't think of it like, oh, this is the big scene. I mean, I've been around long enough to know, don't think like that because you'll screw it up, Yeah.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Next question goes to Arturo Conde with NBC News.
Hi, Denzel. This is Arturo, NBC News. So seeing Macbeth in black and white today, what do you think this version of the story says about color and race in society and morality, good and evil, compared to other versions before?
That's a lot to cover, man. The film's just in black and white. That's all. But I like the question. What was the question again? What do I think about?
So what do you think, for instance, this version of the story today of Macbeth, how does it compare with other versions and what it says about diversity and morality, like good and evil today?
I hadn't seen any other version, so I can't compare it. Obviously, we are diverse, so I think that's a great thing. In my humble opinion, we ought to be at a place where diversity shouldn't even be mentioned, like it's something special. These young kids, black, white, blue, green, or whatever, are highly talented and qualified. So that's why they're there, not because, not to say you're saying that someone did them a favor, but they're there because they're qualified and highly talented.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next question goes to Andrew Marzal with AFP.
Hi, Denzel. Many congratulations on the performance and on your SAG nomination this morning.
Thank you.
Obviously, it's been commented on that Macbeth is fairly often played by a younger actor and Lady Macbeth as well. I'm curious to know, not just in terms of the motivation of the character, but
I thought you were going to say that's usually played by a white actor.
No, we could cover that one. I'm curious to know how Denzel Washington of say 20 or 30 years ago might have played the character differently to how you played it in this film.
Oh, good question. Probably more physical, not giving into the reality of where my knees are at this point in my life. As I rub them, using that, in this storytelling, and the weariness is not the word, but this was it. They're tired, they're older, they're like, look, this is our shot. We're due, give it to us, and they don't. And drastic times make for drastic measures, and the clock is ticking. That's all.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next question goes to Adonis Gonzalez with Nerds of Color.
Hey, Denzel, Adonis with Nerds of Color. First off, I just want to say I'm a huge fan. You have been a hero of mine for pretty much since I came out the womb, if I got to be honest with you. I have to ask you, you have a lot of experience on screen and on stage. And I actually talked to Corey Hawkins a little earlier. He mentioned that you guys were a bit like a theater company because you guys have so much experience. I say most, if not all of you on the set had so much experience, both on screen and on stage. Was working on this film more like working on a play, like being on the stage, or was it more like working on a film set? In your experience, were there any differences at all, if that?
Definitely more like working on a play, because it was a play, because it is difficult like a play, that it's a play that we had to break down first, and working on it like a play because you can't ad lib, you can't improvise the line. So sitting around, Joel's approach in the rehearsal process, it seemed like they were approaching it like a play, like we sat around the table as a company and talked about, things first, and maybe read scenes and slowly put it up on his feet and started blocking. And the rehearsal process was definitely like rehearsing for a play.
Thank you so much.
Question goes to Nikki Fowler with Glitter Magazine.
Nikki Fowler, Glitter Magazine. Hi, Denzel. How are you?
How are you?
Pleasure to meet you. I have a question about your craft and your love of it. And after all the rehearsals, the direction, the running lines, what was it like for you in the moments of your performance to have this freedom to get lost in the role creatively?
Stanislavski, the acting teacher, writer, talked about cutting 90%. You do all the research, you do all your homework, you do all of that, you study the lines, and then you cut 90% of everything you've studied. You throw all that away and you listen and you respond accordingly. I didn't know. I like not knowing what's going to happen. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next question goes to Ashley Dunn with Where's the Buzz?
Hi, Denzel. Happy New Year to you.
Hi, Ashley.
Hello. Love your background, by the way. So you chose not to watch any past performances. So I have to know, how did you approach taking on this historically famous play and making it your own character, but still keeping the essence of what people have become familiar with?
It's not even so much that I chose not to look at any past performance. I just hadn't seen the play before.
Okay.
And I didn't see the value in seeing it now. I didn't want to see anybody and go, oh, shoot, how the heck am I going to be better than that? Or, I didn't want that to affect whatever it was I was going to come up with. So I was coming to it with a fresh eyes and ears and imagination.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Next question goes to Dana Abercrombie with The Coalition.
Dana Abercrombie, The Coalition. My question to you is more about how Macbeth is labeled. Usually it's always the villain. And I was wondering, there are moments where he goes into sheer madness, but there are moments where with the character, other characters, their downfall is sometimes by their own hand. Do you yourself view Macbeth as that pure villain, or as someone who is just driven to madness due to circumstances?
I don't look at it either way. I don't look at him as a villain, or I don't look at him as driven to madness. I look at the circumstances and the information that the words give me. I don't decide that, oh, someone's a villain. That's why bother then? And how do you play that? What is, do you twist your, mustache or whatever? So I think it justifies not the word, but I think a character, you got to love what you're doing and think you're doing it for the right reasons, even if you know it's for the wrong reasons. That makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Next question goes to Alex Wood with Theater Mania.
Hi, Denzel. Congratulations. I was absolutely riveted from shot one till the end. And obviously, you've played some of the most iconic Shakespeare characters in all of Shakespeare's canon. Are there any ways in which you think the treatment of Shakespeare or the performance of Shakespeare has changed over the course of your career? Anything you've noticed or things that surprise you now about the way in which Shakespeare is treated?
No, I don't. I think it's a good thing that the gloves have been taken off and that people try it all kinds of different ways, and why not? You know, what's special about Shakespeare? You know, he should be open to interpretation like any other writer. May not always be successful, but you could give it a shot.
All right, next question goes to Patrick Gibbs with Slug Magazine.
Hi, Patrick Gibbs, Slug Magazine, and what an honor. I'm not an easily starstruck person, but I've been waiting for this moment since 1990 when I saw Glory.
Wow. Where are you from?
Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay, that's where you are now?
Yeah, Slug stands for Salt Lake Underground.
Okay.
That's our magazine. So adapting a classic of the stage to film is something you have some experience with yourself. And Joel's approach to the film seems to have been, to me, very much something that stands as both a great film and a great play. In that sense, I saw some kinship between this and your version of Fences, even though maybe Fences may have been more conscious about trying to open it up for film. At its core, it feels to me like in both cases, a big part of the approach is just trusting in the text. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, what I tried to do with Fences and what Joel did in this film. I mean, thank you for mentioning them in the same sentence. But you know, he's obviously a master and found a way in that I think I didn't find in doing Fences. What was the question?
So, I feel like both films, rather than trying to get too caught up in a lot of artifice, really relied on trusting on the text and staying true to the heart of Shakespeare and August Wilson. And there's a kinship there in that approach. Do you feel that was the approach?
I think one thing we do have in common is that we were smart enough to get out of the way and to trust August Wilson and to trust William Shakespeare.
All right. Thank you very much. Great answer. And don't underestimate what you did with Fences, by the way. I love that film.
Thank you.
All right, next question goes to Michael Major with Broadway World.
Hi, Mr. Washington. What do you think the audiences who are familiar with Macbeth on stage will be surprised about or will enjoy about this new film adaptation?
It's a visual feast. I mean, you can't recreate in a theater what Joel did here. Just light and sound alone, you know, and the space that he leaves for the imagination. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And back to Kuya with Nerds Rule the World.
Creepy Nerds Rule the World. Denzel, thanks again. Do you have a favorite moment working with the entire cast on set?
I think that my mind goes right to when we were all sitting around the table together, you know, like we were all in it together. And, you know, the fear is the same. Even probably more so the more fame you have, you know, you're like, okay, they're all waiting to see what I'm going to do now. I'm like, oh, shoot. You know, but you're still inside, you're acting, but you're just as nervous as the next person. And I remember we had just finished the first read through, and Moses or Ingram or Courier, and them, I forgot who told me the story, but we had just finished the first read through, and I got up and ran out of the room. So Corey and Moses and them, and my daughter was in the film too, so she was there. So they were asking her, like, did he not like it? Is something's wrong with it? My daughter's like, no, he probably just had to go to the bathroom. And it was actually the truth. I just had to go to the bathroom. But I guess they thought I didn't like what had happened. But make a long story long, we were all in it together from beginning to end.
All right, next question is back to Arturo with NBC News.
Hi again. So I was you were talking before about opening up Shakespeare to interpretation. Could you describe a little bit of what was your way into Macbeth as a character specifically, and if there was anything that resonated personally as you were getting into the character today?
Nothing I did different because it's a film in terms of approach. It all starts with the text. And you just start digging in. Well, what does that line mean? And one thing leads you to another, and you look it up, and oh, I see. So what is that? How's that related to this other line on page 22? You just start peeling the onion and digging deeper. One question begs another question for another answer.
All right, next question goes to Adonis with Nerds of Color.
So that
like that Nerds of Color, huh?
yeah, we're a great publication, man. But I wanted to ask that final scene between you and Corey, Macbeth and Macduff, that fight scene. There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of drama in that scene, and I want to know, how did you guys, you and Corey specifically, how did you guys approach that scene? Not just choreography wise, but mentally as actors in your headspace. You have these two characters coming together and sort of resolving this film.
I think we kind of stayed in our own corners, if you will. As I recall, when we were shooting, he was over wherever he was, and I was over there with my guys, and then we'd come together and slash it out, and then go back to our corners and get mopped down. And how did it go? It was like going back to your corner. Like, how's he looking? Well, he got a couple of shots in, but you're going to get him. It was that's the fun part too, because it's like a bunch of grown men playing sword fighting, basically.
Cool, thank you.
All right, next goes to Dana with the Coalition.
Yes, hi, thank you. I was wondering, during either the rehearsal process or during the filming, what I love about this is because of the light and the sound, it feels completely different and refreshing. With that in play, did that mean that the interpretation was slightly different, or did you leave it out for just everyone too? I was just wondering about, because of the light and the sound, how that was impacted, because it was on a sound stage as opposed to like an actual set.
I think it lent itself, because it was on a soundstage, it lent itself to the imagination. Everything was being created, including what we were doing. And we didn't have we had the light. We didn't necessarily always have all the sound that you hear obviously in the finished film. But scenes like when he's king and all of that stuff is floating down from the top of the stage, and it lent itself to bigger performances. It was like a series of small plays, that we would take this section and maybe 2 or 3 pages, and that was a one act, and we'd complete that from beginning to end. So you really got to dig into to each section of the play, each scene.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. That concludes our roundtable. So please say your goodbyes and make your way out of the Zoom room.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's been an honor.
My pleasure.
Bye.
All right, JPI, let's cut.